Happy Thursday and welcome back to a conversation about jump-starting our spiritual life. The little things that we can do that sometimes make a big impact in our spiritual life, and the little things that you can do right now if you need a little extra, you might say, oomph in your relationship with God. Yesterday we talked about doing those little things, right? We talked about taking small steps in prayer. If you're praying for 10 minutes, then just try to pray for 11. Just take one small step. And one of the really critical things for us in that restart of our spiritual life is having an honest conversation about when we are going to pray. When we pray will have an influence of how receptive we are, and when we pray will have a huge influence of how consistent we are. Let's unpack those two things together. I'm a morning person. I've known that for a long time. I get up at 4 o'clock every day, and even on the days when I sleep in, that's 4:30, right? So I'm usually going to wake up well before my alarm. I'm a morning person. When I wake up, I'm alert, I'm awake, I'm ready to go. My brain is ready. I'm also not a night person. Once 7 o'clock hits, I should not make major decisions. I'm not good at night. I don't do well at evening meetings, and I don't do well when it comes to praying at night. If I'm going to talk about the when I'm most receptive, I'm going to acknowledge that I'm at my best in the morning. Now, for other people, when you're going to pray and when you're most receptive is the opposite. It's because you're an evening person, waking up early. You're just not focused. You need lots of coffee. Your brain doesn't turn on until later on. Maybe that's the way you're wired. For some of us, the when you're most receptive has a lot to do with the other things in life, like your kids or your spouse or the rhythm of life or when you work or other influences. I've known lots of people who are morning people just like me, but because of their work schedule or because of the kids, they actually don't pray in the morning because of the other circumstances in life. They're more distracted in the morning. I know lots of people who pray during their lunch break. The when that they're going to pray is on their lunch break because while they may be a morning person or an evening person, they're just less distracted and they're more receptive because they're not distracted, like let's say during their lunch break. So having a conversation with yourself about when you're receptive, sometimes it's the way you're wired, whether you're a morning person or an evening person. Sometimes it's because you're going to deal with distractions. When are you less likely to be distracted? One of the things that happens to me a lot because I am a morning person is my to-do list also begins to get in the morning. And so I also have to be honest with myself about distractions and when am I really going to be settled to pray. I've discovered something in the last couple of weeks as I've been here in Grand Isle and I've been walking a lot more in the morning that I'm more receptive after the walk because my brain is kind of slowed down than I am before the walk, right? So you want to have a conversation with yourself about when you're going to pray because sometimes the fruitfulness, you might say, or our satisfaction of prayer is as much determined by when we're distracted or not distracted or when we're naturally disposed than it is anything else. But knowing when you're going to pray also leads itself to consistency. And consistency in prayer is really important with a lot of us meeting our expectations or even growing in our spiritual lives. You know, it's one thing for us to pray on a random Tuesday, but if the next time that we pray is not for another 21 days, then it's tough for those worlds to connect. And it's tough for us to build some momentum in our spiritual life. So when we pray, also needs to take into consideration consistency. Let me give you another practical example. When I was working before I went to the seminary, I used to pray on my lunch break because that was the most consistent time every day that I could actually spend some time in silence. Depending on whether I worked late the night before, I may not be consistently ready to pray early in the morning because of the variety of things that were happening at night with the company. Praying at night wasn't consistent. It surprised me that the most consistent part of my day was my lunch hour. And it'd take me an hour to eat, and I wouldn't often go out to eat during lunch. I would usually just kind of bring my lunch, and I had lots of time left over in that hour, and that was the most consistent time for me. You want to acknowledge when is going to be the most consistent time for you to pray in your life. And for some of us, that might not be the most obvious answer. Maybe you need to think that through. Maybe you have to sacrifice some things or change your schedule. Maybe you're not going to be able to do all the things you used to do and build a new habit in your life. Maybe you're going to have to sacrifice that television program or that extra time on the internet. Maybe you're going to have to wake up a little early to build some consistency. Whatever it's going to be, knowing when we pray has a huge influence in us jump-starting our spiritual life and taking little steps. So here's a little spiritual exercise for you. I want you to just spend some time in prayer thinking about when you're going to pray, right? In other words, do that first. First things first, right? Think about, ask the Lord to show you when you can pray and expand the boundaries. Don't just assume that because this is when you used to pray, this is when you're going to pray now. Like take a fresh start to the Lord and ask him to show you like in the reality of your day now, when's the best time for you to pray? When you're receptive, when you're not interrupted, when you're not distracted, and when it's most consistent. Those are the things that you want to be looking for in your life. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about being prepared before we pray, because that has a big influence in our life as we try to jumpstart things in our life. But until that conversation unfolds tomorrow, enjoy your prayer with the Lord today. And until we see you tomorrow, God bless you.